By the time I got back from lunch, they were already at his desk. Two compliance officers, gloves on, flipping through folders like they were looking for a confession written in crayon. Ethan just stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. The kind of stillness that makes people uncomfortable if they don't understand it. Cory, of course, was perched at his own desk, pretending not to watch while practically vibrating with smug energy, like a toddler who'd just learned how to lie and couldn't wait to see if it worked. You didn't need a forensics team to figure out who made the call. Let me back up for a second. Ethan Gray isn't the type who ends up in a story like this. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't miss a log entry, doesn't even argue when some half-drunk VP tries to take credit for his work in a meeting. He just documents everything. That's why Telvix trusted him with the segmentation model for the new FinSec account. Most folks didn't even know what was in that model, something to do with behavioral clusters and identity threat triggers. All I knew was, if something ever went sideways, Ethan had a backup plan for the backup plan. And if you're the type who appreciates stories where the quiet one wins, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. 97% of people don't, and it really keeps our team going. Anyway, I'd seen the tension building all week. Cory hated being out of the loop, hated Ethan even more for being handed something he thought he deserved. And it wasn't just about the model. It was the way management would ask Ethan for a quick sanity check even when Cory was the one presenting. The way legal looped Ethan in on data retention reviews, not him. You could feel it burning under Cory's skin. He smiled too wide, laughed too loud. That fake energy that always shows up right before someone does something colossally stupid. I remember Thursday morning too clearly. Ethan had taken his usual solo lunch. He always left right at noon, came back by 12:45 like clockwork. Said he liked the quiet. I'd just gotten back from my own break when I saw the two compliance folks, Celia and Tan, walking in with those department-issued laptop sleeves and a sealed envelope. They headed straight to Ethan's desk. No announcement, no heads up. And that's when I knew. They were random auditing him, they said. Something about a quarterly compliance initiative. Ethan just nodded, calm as ever, even offered to step aside. I watched him slide his chair back. No drama, no protest, like he'd already played this exact scene out in his head 1,000 times. Tan avoided eye contact, which told me it wasn't random at all. Cory shot a glance our way when I stood up to grab coffee, but he didn't say anything. He just leaned back in his chair like a man waiting for vindication. They started pulling open drawers, flipping through labeled folders, inventorying everything Ethan had stored away. It was almost laughable. The man had cleaner documentation than the IRS, color-coded tabs, timestamps on everything. No post-its, no scribbled passwords under the keyboard. If you looked up compliance wet dream in the dictionary, Ethan's workstation would be the picture, but Cory had to make it weird. Guess the Golden Boys got something to hide after all, he said, loud enough to carry. He grinned like someone who thought they'd just won the lottery. Ethan didn't bite, just turned to the officers and asked, "Find anything interesting?" That's when something shifted. Tan froze mid-page. Celia's eyebrows knit together. They were looking at one of the folders that had been buried deep beneath onboarding flowcharts of all things. I couldn't see what was inside from where I sat, but I recognized the folder. I'd seen Ethan reach for it maybe once in the 2 years we sat near each other. Pale gray with no label. He always tucked it away like it was just another HR packet. But the way the officers reacted? You'd think they'd just opened a time capsule full of classified documents. The temperature in the room changed. Celia asked Ethan to step into Conference B with her. Tan followed, folder in hand. Cory stopped laughing. HR pinged the director. And me? I kept sipping my lukewarm coffee, pretending I wasn't holding my breath. Because I'd seen Ethan prepare. I just never thought I'd get to see the moment it all paid off. Celia didn't answer right away. Just glanced at Tan like she wasn't expecting Ethan to be so unbothered. That's the thing about him. He doesn't rattle. He doesn't run his mouth. He just watches. And when Ethan watches, it's like being dissected under a microscope. Polite, silent, surgical. People get nervous. Tan blinked a little too fast and finally said, "Just standard procedure." Standard procedure my ass. The whole floor had that fake quiet hum. Keys tapping, phones buzzing, but no one really working. Everyone was listening. I could see it in the way people kept shifting in their chairs, sneaking glances. Cory, bless his insecure little heart, looked like a kid who'd just planted a whoopee cushion and couldn't wait for the fart. He leaned on the edge of his desk, grinning, spinning a pen like he'd just solved corporate espionage. "They even check the model logs," he asked no one in particular, loud enough for the interns 2 rows down to hear. "Hope nobody's been double-dipping datasets." He knew damn well what he was implying, and Ethan, of course, didn't rise to it, didn't even blink. He just watched as Celia flipped open the gray folder, the one they'd already put aside from the others, and tilted it so the light hit the page. I saw her lips move. A timestamp, a credential ID. She whispered something to Tan. His smile, if you could call it that, died right then and there. Cory saw it too. His grin faltered for a second. You had to be paying attention, but it happened. His jaw tensed, eyes narrowed just a bit, like the dog that barked too loud and realized something bigger barked back. The moment passed quickly, but the silence that followed had teeth. HR hadn't sent anyone down yet, which was weird considering how fast they usually jump on flagged employee cases. No HR, no director. Just the 2 compliance officers going pale over a folder Ethan had supposedly forgotten about. But I knew he hadn't forgotten anything. Ethan never forgets. He's the kind of guy who alphabetizes his Slack folders and updates his keyboard shortcuts once a quarter. He once caught an API error in a vendor's third-party tool because a log was misaligned by 2 milliseconds. That folder wasn't just a parachute. It was a guided missile with someone's name on it. Cory started pacing. He does that when he's nervous. Walks in tiny loops between his chair and the ficus plant like it helps him think. Except this time, the bravado was peeling off him like cheap tint in summer heat. His jokes stopped. His phone stayed face down. At one point, he even typed something in Slack and immediately deleted it. Classic move for someone who doesn't realize compliance still pulls deleted messages from archive logs. Tan finally stood up, folders still in hand, and motioned toward Ethan. "Would you mind stepping into Conference B for a quick clarification?" Ethan just nodded, cool as lake water. "Of course." Cory spoke before he could stop himself. "Should I come too? I mean, I've worked on that cluster set before. Maybe I can help." Celia looked at him the way you'd look at a man trying to break into his own car while holding a crowbar. "That won't be necessary," she said, tight-lipped. And just like that, Ethan was gone. Not escorted, not cornered. Invited. The same way you invite someone when you realize you might have just poked the wrong bear. I couldn't stop staring at the empty folder slot in his cabinet, the one that used to hold that gray file. A chill ran down my back, not because I was scared for him, but because, deep down, I knew what I'd just seen. That wasn't Ethan getting caught. That was Ethan springing a trap. By Friday morning, the office had shifted into full whisper mode. Cory was working overtime to sculpt a new narrative, one flimsy word at a time, like the little propaganda artist he was. "You know Ethan's not who he seems, right?" he said casually at the coffee machine to no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone. Like, guy's been hoarding system logs like a prepper. Who does that? It's always the quiet ones. And people, some of them, started listening. Not because they believed him, but because rumors move faster than facts when you dress them in a suit and sprinkle just enough doubt. I caught wind of it in Slack threads, in half-closed browser tabs when I walked past workstations. "Do you think Ethan's really clean?" I heard they found a physical printout of redacted logs. Wasn't he the one with back-end access to the model clusters? The worst part? No one said anything to Ethan's face, not that they had a chance. By 10 a.m., his login credentials for Helios, the client model staging environment, were revoked. Then, at 10:23, his access to the internal time tracking system was temporarily suspended pending access alignment review. Which is corporate speak for, "We don't know what you know, so we're freezing you out until we do." He didn't protest. He didn't even blink. He just wrote it down. That's what got me, more than anything. Ethan didn't rage or sulk or storm into legal. He opened a notepad, dated the top of the page, and wrote each system lockout as a bullet point. Time-stamped it. I watched him do it. His expression didn't flicker. His pen moved with the same steady rhythm you'd expect from someone logging calibration intervals, not a potential character assassination. But I could see the isolation settle in around him like fog. People stopped dropping by his desk. Meetings that normally included him suddenly didn't. A project timeline email went out, reassigning part of his model oversight to Cory for continuity. That one hit me in the gut. Cory strutted like someone just pinned a medal to his chest for surviving a war he never fought. He even had the gall to lean on my cube and say, "Guess the universe balances itself out, huh?" I didn't answer, just stared at his reflection in my monitor like he was a pop-up ad I was trying to mentally close. Later that day, I watched Ethan walk into the break room and see that his mug, his favorite one, the black ceramic with the SQL joke on it, had been moved to the unclaimed items shelf. That's not protocol. That's someone sending a message. I don't know if it was facilities or someone trying to score points with Cory, but it was petty. And it stung. Ethan just picked it up, cleaned it out like usual, and made his tea. Still didn't say a word. HR hadn't said a word either, which was suspicious in itself. Usually when someone's under internal review, they at least get a formal notice. But Ethan? Nothing. Just digital silence and system blocks, like the company was trying to erase him slowly without admitting they'd started. I passed his desk around 3 p.m. and saw something that stopped me. He was rebuilding something, a folder structure on his external drive. Client-safe templates, compliance logs, log formats, redacted report snapshots. Everything labeled, version-controlled, locked with read-only permissions. He was prepping something, not defending, prepping, like a soldier cleaning a rifle that no one else believed he'd need. That's when I realized Ethan wasn't rattled. He was bracing for impact, quietly, methodically. But I also saw it in his eyes, just for a second when he thought no one was looking. Doubt. Not in the evidence, not in his documentation, but in people. The kind of doubt that creeps in when you do everything right and still watch the world bend toward the loudest liar in the room. I almost said something. Almost told him, "I believe you." But I didn't. I just walked by, because in that moment, silence felt safer, and I hated myself for it. It happened Monday morning, exactly 3 minutes after Ethan sat down at his desk. The weekend hadn't cleared the air. If anything, it made the silence sharper. The office smelled like burned coffee and unease. Cory was already in before 8 a.m., which told me he was nervous. He never came in early unless there was blood in the water. Ethan didn't glance at him. Didn't check if his systems had been restored. He just powered on his workstation, opened a local folder marked with a naming convention only he would understand. Data Archive, 191B JIC. And reached underneath a thin layer of outdated printouts and quarterly compliance summaries. His hand landed on a manila envelope sealed with a single strip of blue tape. That envelope had sat there for almost a year, invisible, innocent. I remembered him stuffing it there months ago, mumbling something about rainy days. He pulled it out and stood. No announcement, no speech. He didn't even straighten his shirt. Just took the envelope, walked across the carpet past all the eyes pretending not to follow him, and stopped at Celia's desk. She'd just returned from a meeting and was still pulling off her coat when she saw him. He placed the envelope gently on her desk and said, "You'll want to look through this. Full credential trail plus redacted summaries for legal eyes only." That was it. No tone, no heat. Just clean precision, like he was handing over a spreadsheet and a weather report, not the corporate equivalent of a guided missile. Celia froze for a second, then slowly pulled the envelope toward her. "Ethan, what is this?" He didn't answer, just nodded once and walked away. I watched her expression change in stages. She cracked the seal, unfolded the first few pages, and then she stopped flipping entirely. Her eyes skimmed one page, then darted to the next. I saw her lips move as she read out credential IDs, access times, flagged behaviors. The printouts were clean, color-coded, labeled, indexed. At the bottom of each page, Ethan Gray with a timestamp. Documented, archived, prepared. Tan appeared within minutes. Someone must have pinged him the second the pages registered. He hovered next to Celia like he was afraid to breathe on the folder. Then I heard it. One word, whispered, from Tan. "Cory." That's when the air in the room changed. Celia didn't nod, didn't react. Just gathered the pages into a stack and stood up slowly. I couldn't see the exact line that made her close the envelope, but I saw her grip tighten. She turned and walked past the common area with the kind of focus you only see when someone realizes they've been fed the wrong story for weeks, and they've just found the real one. Ethan didn't sit back down. He went to the break room, made tea, sat at the little corner table like nothing had happened, and still, he said nothing. That was the part that got to me. Anyone else would have stood up, shouted, "I told you," or pulled some smug mic drop, but not him. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't trying to win. He was just finishing something he started a year ago. By noon, Celia's calendar was blocked out. Legal had been looped in. Cory disappeared into a conference room and didn't come out for over an hour. The vibe on the floor turned from passive curiosity to thinly veiled panic. People were finally putting it together, that maybe the guy they'd been ignoring was the only one who saw the train coming before it hit the track. That folder wasn't just a defense. It was a roadmap. Ethan hadn't built walls. He'd built windows, ones that opened straight into Cory's little data tampering magic show, and now the right people were looking through them. He never looked toward Cory that day. Didn't need to. Cory was already sweating through his collar. Tuesday came with a hush that didn't match the buzz of inboxes and keyboards. You could tell something was happening by what wasn't happening. No Cory jokes, no Slack emojis from his corner, no random compliance spot checks. Everything just stilled. By mid-morning, legal had started their quiet inquiries. Not loud, not formal. Just a series of soft knocks and calendar invites marked review. I heard from a friend in PMO that Celia was in a 3-hour sync with IT's forensics team. They were pulling logs from server-side backups going back nearly 8 months, weeks before Cory ever accused Ethan of anything. That's when I knew the direction had flipped. They weren't trying to prove Ethan guilty. They were trying to see how deep Cory's mess went. Cory, bless him, hadn't caught up yet. He still thought he could laugh his way through it. He made some weak comment about how maybe someone got a little too obsessed with spreadsheets during a stand-up. No one laughed. Even our intern Jordan just stared at him like he'd stepped on a dying bird and called it a joke. Around lunchtime, he cornered me by the fridge. "You know Ethan's not exactly a team player, right?" he said, all casual. "I mean, who prints logs? Who does that unless they're trying to pin stuff on someone?" I just stared at him. He was trying to gauge where the wind was blowing, but the storm was already overhead. "He's just intense," Cory continued, scratching the back of his neck. "Kind of controlling if you think about it." "You should probably save it for HR," I said flatly. That shut him up. Not long after, his calendar lit up with a 1.1 marked compliance debrief. Closed door, no lunch, no noise after. He didn't come back to his desk until almost 4 p.m., and when he did, he looked like someone had poured ice water down his spine. Pale, jaw tight, head down, no Slack activity for the rest of the day. Around 5:30, while I was collecting my things, one of the junior compliance analysts, Eden, approached Ethan. She didn't say much, just lingered near his desk until he looked up. "Hey," she murmured, "just wanted to say, the way you structured those logs made it really easy to follow the chain. Like, ridiculously clean. Thanks for that." Ethan nodded once. "That's the point." She offered a sheepish smile and walked off, glancing over her shoulder like she wasn't sure if she'd just committed social treason. But she had. She picked a side. And it wasn't Cory's. The rest of the office didn't say anything, but I could feel the mood shifting. You can always tell that when people realize they bet on the wrong horse. Chairs swiveled just a little less in Cory's direction. Conversations hushed when he passed by. It wasn't drama. It was abandonment. I watched Ethan pack up his things at the end of the day. No rush, just smooth, unbothered motion. He paused for a second, glanced at his terminal, and typed one more log entry before powering down. Like he was still documenting, still leaving breadcrumbs in case the firestorm wasn't done yet. But I knew it was. It had already started burning. The difference now? People were starting to notice who'd actually lit the match. The first leak hit Thursday morning, and by leak, I don't mean gossip. I mean the kind of classified client infraction that makes people start whispering about lawyers before breakfast. The email came from legal, quiet. No emojis, no CCs, just a subject line that said, "Confidential, containment protocol in progress." That's corporate code for, we found something, it's bad, and if anyone breathes wrong, we could owe millions. What they found was tied to a credential trail routed through back-end dev clusters. At first glance, it was just a series of data exports, CSV pulls labeled as internal validation. But when legal cross-referenced the timestamps with the model's access logs and the scheduled job approvals, none of them lined up. Worse, one export contained client-identifiable attributes from a beta segmentation layer marked Tier 1 restricted, the kind of file you don't move without 3 levels of approval and a virtual paper trail so thick it could suffocate a rhino. The kind of file that, if mishandled, triggers a breach clause, and it had Cory's login all over it. No one said his name in public, no Slack mentions, no emails. But the silence around his desk was radioactive. His keyboard sat untouched. His mouse hadn't moved in hours. The guy who used to laugh too loud and brag about his Apple Watch streaks hadn't been seen in the gym since Tuesday. I heard someone from legal had to call the client personally. No middle management, no, hey, just looping you in. Straight to the top. Telvix was on thin ice, and everyone knew if that clause triggered a breach penalty, we'd be staring down a multi-million-dollar loss, plus the press nightmare that comes with it. Celia stopped making eye contact with anyone. Tan walked through the office with a manila envelope tucked tight under his arm and lips pressed into a white line. Even the director, who once openly called Ethan a little too obsessed with procedure, now avoided the hallway Ethan worked in like it was rigged with tripwires. And in a way, it was. That was the irony. Everyone who once mocked Ethan's meticulous habits, his log templates, his habit of time-stamping lunch breaks, his color-coded backup protocols, they were now clinging to them like lifeboats. I saw Jordan, the intern, open one of Ethan's archived snapshots for a side project and just whisper, "Holy crap." No exaggeration, no drama, just awe. Because what Ethan had been quietly building wasn't a defense. It was a forensic roadmap with time-synced receipts, source identifiers, and alert flags tied to metadata that clearly showed Cory had tampered with internal controls. Twice. Once to mask an unauthorized export, and once to overwrite the export history itself. Both logged. Both preserved. Because Ethan, in his so-called paranoia, had mirrored the back-end logs to a secured local instance when he saw Cory snooping in places he didn't belong. Paranoia, huh? Now legal was quoting Ethan's logs line by line, building a containment report while the board prepared for the worst. Still, no one had officially spoken to Ethan about it. He wasn't invited to the briefings. He wasn't copied on the audit threads. But every now and then, someone from legal would pass his desk, nod slightly, then keep walking. Acknowledgement, without credit. Gratitude, buried under protocol. Ethan didn't react, didn't gloat. Just watched. I passed his desk before leaving for the day, and for the first time in a while, he wasn't typing. He was just sitting there, staring at the compliance screen, watching the system like a captain watching for cracks in the hull. Calm, focused, prepared. Because he knew something the rest of us were just starting to learn. The panic hadn't hit yet, but it would. And when it did, it wouldn't knock. It would break the door down. It happened at 8:42 a.m. on a Wednesday, without warning, without noise. Just the sudden appearance of 2 people from security and 1 from HR outside Cory's cube. He wasn't cuffed or dragged or humiliated. That would have made it easier to explain. He just stood up slowly, didn't speak, didn't even look at anyone, and followed them toward the back hallway near the freight elevators. His chair was still warm when someone from facilities came to box up his desk. By noon, all traces of him were gone. Laptop, returned, access badge, deactivated, monitors unplugged, post-its scraped off, keyboard wiped down like he never existed. Someone even removed his nameplate. No memo, no department-wide email, just silence, and a corner of the office that suddenly stopped buzzing like it had lost its static charge. I caught a glimpse of Ethan's face when the box was being rolled past his row. He didn't blink, didn't shift. He just kept working. One hand on the mouse, the other scrolling through compliance tickets. No satisfaction, no visible reaction, but I saw the slow breath he let out. Controlled, like a man who'd been holding it in for months. Around 1 p.m., Ethan's calendar lit up with a new invite. Private HR discussion, 1:30 p.m., sent directly by the head of People Ops. Not the HR coordinator, not legal, the top of the food chain. I saw him glance at the invite, read it twice, then calmly stand and make his way across the floor. 10 minutes later, the door to the small glass conference room shut behind him. I don't know what was said in that room. Not entirely, but I heard snippets after the fact. A few fragments slipped out from someone who walked by and saw the tone shift through the glass. We appreciate your diligence. You've demonstrated an exceptional standard. There may be an opportunity in compliance oversight, strategic lead capacity if you're open to discussing it. Not, we need to clean up this mess. Not, we're hoping to contain fallout. But, you were right, and we need your help now. Ethan didn't smile when he came back, but he walked differently. Not taller, not smug, just rooted, solid, like someone whose footing had finally been acknowledged by the people who once questioned if he belonged on the trail at all. People noticed. You could feel the shift in how they looked at him. No longer the obsessive log nerd, no longer the guy who probably has a spreadsheet for his dreams. He was the one who'd prevented a multi-million-dollar breach, stopped an internal fraud train before it derailed a major client relationship, and didn't say, "I told you so" once. That's what makes it worse for people like Cory, when the quiet ones win without rubbing your nose in it. By the end of the day, HR had scheduled a follow-up. Legal sent Ethan a formal letter of thanks for his invaluable contributions to the integrity of internal systems. His badge was reactivated for system tools he hadn't used since the model handoff. Not just reactivated, escalated. He never mentioned it to anyone. He just sat down, opened his log dashboard, and resumed his work. Same chair, same screen, same man. Except now, people listened when he spoke. And when he didn't, they listened even harder. 2 weeks after Cory vanished like a typo in a redlined contract, Ethan's name showed up on an internal memo, quietly, without fanfare, tucked near the bottom of a process improvement initiative update. But people read it. Oh, they read it because it didn't just say he'd be consulting on the post-incident remediation effort. It said he was co-leading the rebuild of Telvix's compliance architecture, the same system that failed to catch Cory's stunt in real time, the same system that Ethan, in his so-called paranoia, had outperformed with a handful of manual logs, a color printer, and a backup protocol he wrote himself on a rainy weekend. Now legal wanted that system rebuilt from the ground up with Ethan at the helm. Celia dropped by his desk the morning the announcement went live. She didn't say much, just handed him a draft outline and said, "We'd like your input. You're already doing half of what we need." He nodded, reviewed it in silence, then pulled out a drive labeled Baseline Template V1.4 and said, "This should help." The new system wasn't flashy. It wasn't some Silicon Valley vaporware product with a neon dashboard and monthly upsells. It was meticulous, permissioned, and clean. Audit trails built with sanity checks. Change logs with role-level visibility. A mirrored log backup stored separately on a rotating encryption key. In short, it was the kind of system you only build when you've lived through the fallout of one that failed. Ethan didn't ask for a raise, didn't push for a new title. He turned down a private office. When HR asked what he wanted on his internal profile, he replied, "Just leave it as data architecture and compliance systems. I'm not here for LinkedIn endorsements." The first time I saw his old logs used in a training session, I almost laughed. A junior analyst named Casey was giving a brown bag lunch talk about best practices in access monitoring, and up popped one of Ethan's exported entries, time-stamped, annotated, complete with a compliance note on credential chaining. "Honestly," Casey said to the room, "this log structure is the gold standard. We've started using it as our internal template." I looked at Ethan. He was standing in the back with his arms crossed, sipping lukewarm coffee from that same SQL joke mug. No smile, but I could see something settle in his shoulders, a kind of quiet gravity that said, "This is the work. This is what matters." He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. He was just building the thing he'd needed all along. And now, instead of dismissing him as a bit intense or overly detailed, people were sending him spreadsheets asking, "Is this clean enough?" And, "Would you mind giving this a once-over?" The man they once mocked for having contingency folders was now the architect of the very system that would keep the rest of them honest, from target to backbone, from sideline to essential. And not once, never once, did he ask for credit. Because he already had what he came for, control over what he could build, and a structure strong enough to make sure no one like Cory ever slipped through again. The quarterly town hall was its usual brand of polished awkwardness. Forced smiles, over-designed slide decks, and a line for the catered coffee that wrapped halfway to the elevators. Most people showed up out of obligation or curiosity. A few just wanted to hear if bonuses were still on the table. No one really expected anything meaningful. Then, 27 minutes in, after the product roadmap, the Q3 numbers, the obligatory "we're all a family" lie, the COO paused at the mic, glanced at his notes, and said something none of us expected. There are moments in a company's life when disaster is avoided not by protocol, but by preparation, he said, clearing his throat. Recently, we faced such a moment, and thanks to a silent professional who took his role seriously, even when no one was watching, we averted what could have been a catastrophic breach. He didn't say a name. He didn't need to. Eyes began to drift, quietly, respectfully. Toward the third row of desks in the northeast quadrant where Ethan sat, still, focused, backlit by the pale glow of 2 monitors and a wall of neatly stacked folders. He didn't look up, didn't shift in his chair, just clicked once, closed a resolved compliance ticket, and took the last sip of his coffee. No smile, no recognition, just the sound of someone typing again, like the moment never happened. Someone behind me whispered, "That's him, right?" And someone else replied, "Yeah, it's always been him." The applause was polite but real, not for a promotion, not for a show, just a ripple of something more rare, respect. After the meeting, people passed Ethan's desk without words, but with acknowledgement. A nod here, a glance there. One junior analyst left a post-it on his monitor that just said, "Thanks for keeping us clean." He peeled it off, tucked it into his notebook, and opened a new audit trail file. Title: Q4 Activity Prep. Because that's who he is. Not the guy who takes credit. Not the guy who seeks revenge. Just the one who builds systems solid enough to outlast bad actors, lazy oversight, and all the noise that tried to bury him. When I passed by his desk on my way out that afternoon, he finally spoke. Soft. Almost like he was thinking aloud. "When you build the map," he said, eyes still on the screen, "it's hard to get lost, even when someone tries to bury you." And just like that, he went back to work. Same desk, same mug, same man. But this time, everyone knew who the hell he was.